Hey everyone, it's Anne from Lolly and Grace, and welcome to part 5 of the Lolly and Grace needle painting stitch along. We are almost done with this flower. All we have left to do in this part is to stitch up these little twiggy leaf bud things. Not quite sure what they are, even though I designed them. And then to finish up the back of the hoop. So stitching these little twiggy things is really very simple. I've already done these black outlines. They are done exactly the same way that you stitched the outlines on the leaves. It's 2 strands of black DMC thread, and it's a split back stitch, all of it. This is another place, this is particularly a place where as I mentioned way back at the first part when we were working on the outlines, that it's really important to do very small stitches because these little shapes are, the lines not so much, but these little shapes are pretty small and the curves are really tight, so it's super important to make really small stitches so that those curved little teardrop shapes really show up. So then once all of that is stitched, all of those outlines, then all we need to do is to fill in the insides with just a teeny bit of satin stitch. And if you don't like satin stitch, a lot of people don't. I personally love it, but there's just very little. And it's really not even, it's barely satin stitch. It's really just about maybe 4 or 5 just straight stitches filling in this little teardrop shape. Now, I will mention, let me show you I have a picture here that I've done up. I will mention that when you're filling this in, it's such a small shape, it's really hard to make little teeny tiny filling stitches because you are trying to go inside that black outline. So rather than trying to make the stitches go across this way, like that, those are going to end up being little tiny stitches, and little bitty tiny short choppy stitches like that are more frustrating to stitch. The way I like to fill each of these little teardrop shapes is at an angle. So I tend to start here and I work this way, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you'll get a 5th stitch in there. So all of those stitches are pretty long and they kind of fill in the teardrop shape. You could do the shape like this if you wanted to also. That's fine too, really. But I tend to do all of them like this, and it was pretty quick and it filled up really easily. So I don't recommend little short choppy stitches that go back and forth like that. I like to go at an angle. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Cover up my marker. All right, so the only one I have left to do is this little teardrop shape right here. So as you can see, I'm going to start right there. I'm using 2 strands, and the color chart will show you what color to use where. And hopefully you can see that this is really just straight stitches right next to each other. I'm working carefully to not try to split those black outlines, just like I did when I was working next to them before around the flower and the leaves. So I'm just trying to come up inside the shape, maybe one more teeny stitch, just like that. So you can see how fast those little bud thingies work up. And they just add a nice little dash of color. So the only thing left to do now is to finish up the back of the hoop, and the instructions for that will be on the blog post. Well, I kind of told you a little fib earlier on when I said we only had one more thing to do, which was these little things right down here, the little buds. But there's actually one last thing to stitch, and I almost forgot about it, but I'm glad I didn't because I really love the way they look. And it's these black lines, these sort of rays that come out on top of the petals, on top of the needle painting. So they're super simple, obviously. It's just I'm using 2 strands of DMC thread, and all you have to do, I am looking at the diagram that shows where to put each line, and you just have to move these black threads out of the way. And let me look at where my next line goes. So obviously these are there's nothing to these, just come up. I am deciding where to put these lines I'm looking on my diagram, and I'm either judging it based on where it is on this curve or where it falls inside these needle painted shapes. So just look on the diagram, and if you say to yourself, okay, well, it's, it's not over here where the pink meets the yellow, it's kind of right in the middle of the pink right there. So not that it has to be exactly the way it was on the design, but if you want to follow it, that one, I'm looking at the diagram, and I know that one comes up right in that little curve, and it goes down right inside the center of that, right there, that orange section. I'm tucking that stitch up under the black fringy stuff. Once again, trying to keep it out of the way. And I'll just do that until this is finished. Let me see, I've got about 2 or 3 more lines. Do that quickly for you. Let me see, I think I have, so I ended up down there. Not sure those are exactly where they were on the diagram, but that's okay. One last line, tuck it up under there, and now I'll just smooth that stuff back down. And there, all done. I really like the way those black lines look, so you can leave them off if you like, but I like the way they look. And I just want to say thank you for joining me for this stitch along. I've really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone's projects as you're working on them. Please join me on Instagram. I am at Lolli and Grace on Instagram. There's a lot of fun stuff happening over there. I'll show you behind the scenes photos and what inspires me and new projects and new patterns when they get released, new kits and what's in all the kits and all sorts of fun stuff, all sorts of fun stitchy stuff happening over there on Instagram. So thank you again for joining me. I hope you have a great time stitching up this flower.